All right, guys. Hello. My name is Mike. We're Kubera. We're starting the Cajutel Livestream today. If there's any issues with the audio or video, please let us know in the comments section below. We will be answering your questions. So if you had any prepared or are currently thinking of any for Cajutel, we do have the CEO, Andreas, here, and feel free to ask whatever you would like. So thank you, Jack, by the way, for modding. Don't think I've forgotten about your exit scam. And here we got our special guest, Andreas.
Welcome, everybody.
Perfect. So with the video section, I did just want to say, whenever a person is talking, it's going to kind of blow up. I wasn't able to figure out the way to make it dual screen. I do apologize for that. Hello, Toasty. Hello, Your Square. Hello, Tinash. For the new viewers, or for anybody who is going to be watching this from home, this is the same company that I did make a sponsored video about a week ago. Some people were a little bit concerned that it's an African company. However, with this, I'm quite confident about this project. That's why I'm doing this in the first place. Hello, everybody. Welcome in. We're just going to wait for everybody to just kind of roll in. But while this is going on, Andreas, could you explain Cajutel for maybe the new viewers or those from home exactly what it is, what your mission is behind it, and why you're passionate about this?
Well, to put it short, I mean, Cajutel is basically an internet service provider serving the West African market. And while this is very common in Europe, you have many options. In West Africa, the access to the internet is very, very limited. And that's because the infrastructure is not there. And what we're trying to do with this project is to actually build the infrastructure for everybody. So the large public can get access to the internet, which is currently just not there. And so the big difference is in Europe, when you're building an internet provider, then you can just relay, piggyback on existing infrastructure from the telephone companies, which was built when, 40, 60 years ago, they were putting copper wires into the ground, and then they came with fiber and so on. And this is just not existing in Africa. There's no fiber in the ground, there's no copper in the ground.
Right.
I mean, if you look at the statistics, the whole country had 5,000 phone lines in total for 1.7 million people. And that was before the mobile operators came there. So a lot of things have changed when the mobile operators came there about 10 years ago. And now everybody has a mobile phone. So in 10 years, they went from 0 to 100%. And while now everybody has a phone, almost nobody has access to internet. It's like 2 to 3% have access to the internet, and access to very, very slow speed internet. So that's what we're trying to change, and bring reliable, high-speed internet. And compared to Europe, what we have to do there is we not only have to build the radio infrastructure to bring the capacity to the end user, we also have to lay the fiber to connect those towers together. We also have to bring the energy there, because there's no reliable energy. You might get energy from the grid, but maybe not at the place where you want to build the tower. And maybe it's going to be down for an hour because something broke. And it's also just generated out of diesel generators. So we don't like that. For telecommunications infrastructure, you need something seriously reliable. So what we do is we generate our own energy as well, which means we have to put solar panels everywhere and batteries and so. So you have your own energy production. So that's the big difference in Africa. You have to do a lot of stuff yourself. On the other hand, you then also own it and you control it, which means you don't have any monthly cost to rent power because you just create it yourself. So you have a lot of initial costs, which are higher than in other places because you cannot piggyback on somebody else's infrastructure. But on the other hand, you have a lower operating cost at the end. So it pays off.
Right, right. And this is a very scalable project. Depending on how much money is involved, you're able to go from 1 tower to, let's say, 10 towers to 50 towers. How exactly is that going to work? Like, let's say you have a plan in mind with 50 towers. Okay, you have the funds for that. Where do you go next? What's the next step with that?
Okay, well, the plan is built the way that we first have to go into the capital, which is Bissau. And to connect the capital to the long distance sea fibers, we probably have to build something 5 or 6 towers along the way to get us connected to Banjul, which is one of the countries where the sea cable is landing. So that's about 250 kilometers. So we have to bridge 250 kilometers to get the capital of the country, which is Bissau, connected to the international links, where we can get access, to fiber going up to Frankfurt, to the international internet exchanges, and so on. No, it's not South Africa; it's West Africa.
In the south,
yeah. South Africa is already quite well covered in terms of internet. West Africa, there's lots of white spots, and Guinea-Bissau is one of them.
Oh, wait. We did have the audio cut out for a little bit.
Okay.
Oh, okay. We're all good. Sorry about that.
Okay.
If there's any interruptions, by the way, guys, just let us know through the comments. Just bear with us. It is actually the first conjoined live stream we're having on this channel through Google Hangouts. So for those at home, yeah. But anyways, with West Africa, some viewers might be curious. It sounds like a nice project, but why in West Africa?
Well, one of the issues is that the market is there. This is one of the spots where you don't have a lot of internet yet, and there's lots of business to make. If I would have plenty of money and I want to build an ISP, I'm not going to go to South Korea, where 99% of the households have internet. Then you would have very, very big competition, and everybody has super fast internet. You go to the places where people don't have internet yet, where you can bring them real value. And you're also going to get new customers which never have internet before. And the big difference is those are going to be the most loyal customers. If you go into a country where you have 5 or a couple of internet providers there, and you start competing with them, then you're going to get all the customers who says, well, the only thing which counts for me is the price, and who are not loyal to their ISP. So which means you are having a better price than the competition. They come to you, and then the competition lowers the price of it, and then they're gone again. You want to get the customers who want to come to you and says, well, if the price goes down 10%, I don't care, as long as it's reliable and works. And those are the customers which will stay for you for 20 years. Unless you're really screwing up something and make something bad, they're going to stick with you.
Right.
I mean, that's the experience I had in Switzerland when I started an ISP there.
And with that, could you go a little bit further into details?
Into what meaning?
With that ISP in Switzerland.
Well, I started the internet provider in Switzerland in 1994. It was called Pignet, and it started really small. We had like 4 people were using computers with modems to dial up on the phone line to our access point. And from there, we had the permanent connection into the internet. And it was very small. I mean, my internet connection was like 9,600 bits per second. And it's ridiculously slow in these days. But at that time, the internet was, FTP, it was Telnet. When I started the internet provider, I have never even seen a browser. That didn't even exist. Or it might have been existing, but it wasn't known. It took like half a year later until I've seen the first web browser. And the web browser was like, oh, you can display text. And it can include a picture, but you had the option to actually not show the pictures because it's too slow to download pictures. And so this was the situation we had then. And then people were getting into ISDN, so you had 64 kilobits, or if you had 2 channels, then you had 128 kilobits. And then things get faster. ADSL, you had the megabit, and then you had VDSL, where you can have like 10, 25 megabits download speeds. And now people have fiber to the home, where you can get a gigabit for like $60 a month or so. So in that time, we had a long increase of speed from 9,600 kilobits to a gigabit, which is, well, like 100,000 times faster. And that's in like 25 years. And of course, because of this speed increase, today we have things like YouTube. You know, in 1994, YouTube was impossible, because you would have like one frame every 3 seconds. You know, and this is a big difference to the internet of today. Yeah, it's, I mean, and the situation is they now have an internet access there in Africa, which is corresponding to the speeds we had in like 1994, 1995. And of course, even if you have a supercomputer and everything, you cannot just use the internet of today with those speeds. And that's why nobody uses it yet. So that's the big differentiator we're trying to change.
Okay, okay, gotcha. And we have our moderator, Jack, here asking, what is going to stop a monopolization? If he is the only seller, he can change what he wants.
Well, who do want to monopolize it? I mean, the situation is there are two mobile operators there. They provide internet, but at very low speeds. If we come to market, we're going to challenge them quite a bit in terms of what the internet is. But they have the phone business, and they make the money with the phone business currently. So they might not be that keen into investing into infrastructure to also provide internet. The second thing is, you know, if those companies have too much money and just want to move us out of the market, they of course can do the same thing. They can compete with us. But then they have to build the same infrastructure, because they have the same problem. They don't have anything reliable, fast, which they can piggyback on. So it's like it's a race on arm's length. Everybody has the same conditions to start. So you know, maybe they have more money than we do, and they can build faster because they have more money. They just could do this. But still, there's 98% of the people who don't have access to the internet. So we can easily compete. So our business plan actually says that in 6 years, we have 14% of the population covered. And 40% is a very low figure in 6 years. If you're thinking that it took 10 years to get 100% of GSM. So it could be that we end up having 20%. If we have really, really strong competition, maybe it's going to be 10%. But still, the business plan, the costs we have to operate this network is directly proportional to the amount of customers we have. The more customers we have, the more capacity we need on the towers, the more towers we need to fill the gaps to make the cells smaller. So, of course, you have a certain economy of scale the bigger you get. Because once you have laid fiber, then you have enough capacity also to have twice the capacity. You're not going to lay a second fiber, because the first fiber has enough capacity to go way beyond. But the big cost is like the towers.
Sorry to interrupt, but Spicy David says he cannot hear. If there's any other issues, if anybody else is having audio issues, because sometimes what happens is one individual just has their settings misadjusted. If anybody else cannot hear, please let us know. We shall continue. But if there are issues, we shall try and fix it. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay. Now I lost where was I?
Oh, God.
Well, the scale of the infrastructure is basically that you have to build a certain base infrastructure, and then depending on how many customers you get, you just have to build additional towers. So if we have less customers, we have to build less towers. I actually made several variants of the business plan where we built slower or faster. And the interesting result was actually that depending on how fast or how slow we build, we need more or less money. But if we build faster, we also get faster customers. And the return of investment and the break-even point of being profitable was almost the same. So you need more money, but you also make more money. When you have more access to more money, you can build faster, but you also get more money faster in because you can serve more customers. And when you can serve more customers, you also make more money.
That's an actually good question right there from Ramahandran. What is the need for the ICO for this business model? Why not go for the traditional venture capitalist route, which this is a good part, or shares?
Well, the thing is, he says or shares, but in fact, what we are doing with the ICO is exactly the same. We are selling shares. So even though we're talking about coins and tokens, we are selling a token which represents a share. So if you buy a token, you are a shareholder, which makes a lot of things easier, because if you have a model where the token is like some kind of revenue share but not tied to the company, then you have less protections. In our case, we say a share is a token is the electronic representation of a share, which means you are a shareholder, you are entitled to vote on important decisions of the company and so on. What is in terms of why we go ICO and not traditional venture? We try to get venture capitalists into this. First of all, the venture capital companies are usually very greedy. So they want to see high returns very quick. The second problem is we didn't find the right ones, and we were looking for a while. Because if you look at Africa, a lot of venture capitalists are not looking at Africa at all. So you have to find the right ones which understand that market. And that was quite a challenge for us. So that's why we said, well, why not just go with the ICO market? Because it's an interesting new model, which means we're going to have a lot more investors with smaller amounts. But the crypto coin system is designed for this, we have like 100 investors by now, and the smallest investor has put like $9 in. So it's easier to get people to invest small amounts. So that makes the ICO different. But on the other end, it's it's the same as an IPO, except you don't have the banks in it, and you don't have the the stock exchange in it. So you have easier regulations and less paperwork to do. But right. In terms of the functionality, it's exactly the same.
And so with the regulations, Cryptzilla is asking here. First off, really quick question from before we get to Cryptzilla. I lost it. How much does he need to raise? So with this amount, independent of whatever the number actually is, you're able to scale it up. So if it's a smaller amount, you're just going to do smaller, less towers. If it's larger, you're able to move up and get more internet quicker. But eventually, as there's more profit, let's say there's a smaller amount, you're still able to start the business. But how much is the exact amount what's the goal, let's say?
Okay, we have set us two main goals, which are actually phase 4 and 5 of our ICO offering. If we reach phase 4, which is like $12 million, we are able to build Guinea-Bissau. If we are reaching $30 million, which is phase 5, we can include Guinea as well, which is the country south of Guinea-Bissau, which has similar problems. It's a little better developed currently in terms of infrastructure. But we're planning to go into that as an extension after having built Bissau, or Guinea-Bissau. If we get less than 12 million, then we have to see what we can do. I mean, we can build with a lot less, but we also expose ourselves to more risk in terms of competition. Because I think one of the advantages is if you build fast, you are ahead of the competition. If you build slow, then the competition might start a half a year later, but they will be able to, you know, to compete with you more heavily. So that's why we prefer to build fast. But you know, as long as we get a couple of millions, we can start this project. And at the end of the day, if we're not reaching the 12 million, then we will have to do, you know, a shareholders meeting and decide what to do. So it's then actually up to the shareholders to decide, you know, should we cancel the whole thing, and or should we continue, or should we extend? You know, we might also be able to that we just extend the time until we reach enough people. That's actually something we're looking into also for other reasons.
Okay.
But there's you know, this is not something we're deciding right now.
Right, right. And that sort of answers Jack's question as well. There will be a shareholder meeting, sort of. There will be a shareholder meeting if there's any issues with this. What about everything goes to plan, or there are some concerns? How often will shareholder meetings be held? Will it be annually? Will there be any?
That's a good question. Well, legally, we have to do it annually. But of course, if we have important things to discuss, we can do it more often. The interesting thing is, with systems like Aragon 1 or so, you can have totally virtual shareholder meetings where everybody votes by his token. So you can actually put up things to be voted just by using the crypto coins.
Okay. Okay, gotcha. And that's one of the actually coolest ways of voting through the blockchain, because everything's recorded. There's no manipulation at that point, and it's all public information. So everybody's able to go through that. And we do apologize, Cryptzilla. I know we said we'd get to you. Here we are. Sorry for the delay. By the way, for anybody who's new to the live stream, we're talking about Cajutel. If you're really confused on what's going on, check out the video first. And then this live stream, it does have a 30-second delay. That's not something we can fix. It's just through YouTube. But this live stream will also be available for viewing after. So most likely we're going to do an hour or maybe a little bit over. But if you can't catch the full thing and you want to hear more details, definitely check it out later. And it will take a couple minutes to process, up to 30 minutes, but it should be available by tonight. So Cryptzilla is a little bit concerned here about the reason they don't want to go VC is so they don't have to answer to anyone. When it's just coins, they have zero responsibility to investors. And a little bit earlier, his question here was, let's see, what was the exact question? It wasn't a question. What would your response be to the reason they don't want to go venture capitalists is so they don't have to answer to anyone. It's just zero responsibility. And this isn't going out to just Cajutel, but this goes out to all ICOs, which there's pros and cons to any investment project, as with VCs as well, which just from my limited knowledge about it, I know that venture capitalists, it's, you know, they're sharks. They all they care about is the money. They want to invest a bunch of money and they want to see profit, but also they're very, very busy individuals where they might have 100 projects and they don't have a lot of time to look through the papers. The paperwork needs to be there. It's very difficult to actually find venture capitalists who just have the time for your project. It doesn't even matter how great your project is. It's their job. They have to look through a bunch of different investments and they only have a very limited amount of space. So there's pros and cons to every investment vehicle out there. But with this ICO, Andreas, again, the question here is, what would your response be to Cryptzilla's? The reason they don't want to go VC is so they don't have to answer to anyone. When it's just coins, they have zero responsibility to investors.
Yeah, I understand his concern. I mean, there are some ICOs out there which actually just say, we're selling you a coin and we're building some kind of infrastructure. You know, it's like you have a company A who sells coins, gets the money, the company owns the money, and then builds some ecosystem which might be worth something or not. And then the coin might become valuable. But if the ecosystem fails, then the company still has the money and, you know, the investor would have a useless coin which he cannot use. And I see this as unfair to the investor. But apparently a lot of people still invest and just believe that this is going to happen. In our case, the coin or the token is a share. And so we have a shareholders or decision to declare that all shares are electronically issued in the form of a coin, which means that if somebody is totally upset with us, he can sue us, go to court and say, well, I'm a shareholder of this company and I have the shareholders' right according to the law. And we have to follow this because this is declared, this is official that the token is a share. So we cannot just do whatever we want. We have to follow the shareholders, and the shareholders have their voting rights. And that's not the case with a lot of ICOs. But we specifically didn't want to do it that way, that the shareholders would just get some useless coins, which has, you know, maybe a value at some point, because I think it's unfair to the investors.
Right.
What concerns the venture capitalist, I can only confirm that the biggest problem with the venture capital companies is actually to get them to read your business plan. And when they have 20 business plans coming from Silicon Valley, and then there's one coming from Africa, they're going to look through the 5 of the Silicon Valley ones, which have an interesting title. And then they're going to invest into one of them, maybe. And of course, the venture capitalists, they want to make a very big return very quick. So they're looking at projects where they can say, okay, this is the next Google or Facebook or Instagram or whatever. They want to invest $1 million today, wait for 2 years, and then bring it to the stock market, do an IPO, and then cash out with 10 million. And they say they are investing in the 100 companies, 90 of them will fail and 10 of them will go okay. So they're ready to risk 90% going away, but the 10% will bring them more than 100 they invested. That's their business model.
Right.
And now our project is more conventional in the terms that it's a high investment in the beginning. It's not just something you invest and then maybe somebody makes an interesting software. There's assets in it. You're building real infrastructure. It's a traditional business model. So it's maybe a little bit not too sexy for the venture capitalist as well, because they're thinking, well, they want to have high returns very quick. And this is not a project which gives you a high return in a year or two. It might gives you a serious return in, you know, year 3, 4, 5 and ongoing, and then it gives you a return every year. So it's an interesting long-term investment. It's not a short-term investment.
Right. And some people, they prefer short-term gratification. In that case, well, that's fine. This may not be the project for you. It's mainly a long-term investment vehicle where, you know, if you feel for it, fantastic. If you have any questions, well, the way I look at it is there's a lot of ICOs out there, and there's some that plagiarize everything and they're really shifty. I'm going to address a couple of comments here. First of all, Crypto Grind. I don't want to be rude here, but Crypto Grind is trolling. So anybody who's looking through his comments, and the first thing about that is his comments at the very beginning of this stream ended up in the spam filter. He was trying to promote his own channel. So, you know, everybody has bias. Everybody has bias behind their comments. Anyways, so Andrew Mark was asking, is there any link? Yeah, links for Cajutel, the white papers, everything are in the description down below. And once this is a video, I will also put them in the comments. Also for the previous videos, you can find all the links there. And let's see. So a lot of people are just really kind of curious about the ICOs, but this isn't just going to Cajutel. This is going for a lot of them in general. And Jack, good question from Jack. So we were talking about documentation and what happens if, you know, something bad happens and people who would be threatening lawsuits and all this. How would the documentation go with Cajutel for both your side and for the side of any investors?
The documentation, well, there is, you know, there's what's on our website, which we published, is there's the white paper saying we make initial coin offering, declaring this is our business plan. This is what we want to do. There's exact calculations in the Excel sheet of what we're trying to do. There's, like in an IPO, there's a public offering saying we are selling those amounts of tokens, which are also shares, at those amounts. And we declare how many shares we have. We have a document saying this is the shareholders' decision to issue new shares of the company, and it's saying also that the shares are issued in the form of a token. So by those documents, you have the trail saying, well, if you own a token, then you own a share. So this is one thing.
Right. And just a quick thing to address about the camera angles. I know that was a troll comment, but it's really how you position the camera. For example, I'm going to show you guys. You know, I hide my camera here behind the tape, so I have my webcam, but it's above. Don't focus on the little things. If you're focused on the little things, that means I'm sorry, but well, like the little things that aren't related to the project, like the video quality or the internet connection, or because there's more important things to look at, like the actual details with this investment vehicle. Andrew's asking here, I don't mean this flippantly, but why does this benefit West Africa?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, for me, the interesting thing is that the project is in a place which is more or less virgin, which is an interesting place to make business because there's a bigger gain than if you would go to other countries. So if this would be in Mongolia, I would do it in Mongolia. I don't care if it's Africa or South America or whatever. You go there where the business is. That's one point. The second thing is, of course, there's a side effect of it. If you go to Africa, then and you bring them access to internet, you also bring them education, because people can look up Wikipedias and learn a lot of things. They can participate in online universities and so on. And this is, of course, having an effect on the country as a whole, because people get easy access to information in places where it's not easy. In Europe, before you had internet, you can go to bookstores, you can go to universities, and you can learn a lot of things. But in Africa, this is much more difficult. So by bringing the internet there, you also help them to help themselves. I mean, we're not giving any online training courses or so, but there's lots of information already out there, and others have this information, and you give people a way to access information. And by the way, I have a very big screen. That's why the camera is so high.
The little things. And someone noticed here, Halvard, some sharks have invested 100 plus ETH. So if you go to Etherscan, you're able to find out how many addresses there are and some of the investments. Like we were saying, some people have invested very little. That's the interesting thing about ICOs. You're able to, even if you have no idea what a cryptocurrency is, or you're in Australia or New Zealand or America, wherever you're located around in the world, for any ICO, you're able to actually take part in this, while with stocks, it's a little bit more difficult and people wouldn't be as inclined. While with this, if you do your proper research, it is a very good tool if you use it properly. But there's also those people who you have people who have bought like one token, while other people have bought up to 1,500. And I'm not sure if that's the same address, but 1,500, 1,200. So it all depends. I mean, some people look at the financials. You have people who believe in this project quite heavily. And I don't know, to some that may mean a lot, to some it may not, but you want to look at as many details as possible. And also, some ICOs, they would never even show their faces like to the camera. So one of the most important things is, even if you have like the best product or service out there in the world, you need to market it. And that's why certain ICOs are going with YouTubers, with influencers. They want to get the information out there, but also through this interview, you're able to ask questions. Now, hopefully we try and get through as many questions as possible here, but it's interesting. Just think about that. Some people would be very, very nervous about this. and they wouldn't agree to this. They wouldn't want their face there because they have something to hide. So it's, why do you think you will be able to, okay, that's not, let's try and keep this to Cajutel related questions, and any other questions, we'll have another live stream as well. The white paper is a business plan, not a blockchain related. The white paper, what, could you explain that a little bit further, Mal? What happens if you don't meet your cash target? Michael in Glasgow is asking, do we get a full refund?
Well, that's just a thing I answered a little bit before. When we don't reach the goal, we can either go, well, we have different options. Either, you know, dissolve the company and pay back what's left. We can, you know, start with less. We can wait longer until we have more money. But it's a shareholder's decision what to do at that point. And that means we cannot predict what's going to happen, because people have invested in Cajutel, and those are shareholders. And it's up to them to decide if we wind up the project and just pay everything back we have, or if we, you know, this is an important decision of what the company should do. So it's up to the shareholders to decide at that point. And we actually have put that in the frequently asked questions on our cajutel.io page, where there's different scenarios. And to answer your question about the investor in size, you know, the smallest investors, I think he has bought a 0.1 token or something like this. I think it was $9, if I remember correctly. And the biggest one is just a few days ago, who bought twice 1,500 tokens, which is like almost $50,000. So that's the range we're talking about investors. And there's currently 97 token holders, according to Etherscan. So it's all visible of who holds which token. You just don't know which address is which.
Right, but everything's on the blockchain. You guys are able to check it out. And so this is a question coming from myself, but I'm sure a lot of people are curious about this as well. And we have addressed this in the interview as well on the previous video. But apart from, well, okay, what would you say are the top concerns for this project from your perspective and for the investor's perspective?
The top concerns people have, or I have?
Let's go through both. Okay.
If I look what you know, the questions I see coming to my side, you know, a lot of people have concerns about, okay, it's Africa, you know, who tells me that you know, tomorrow we're not going to have anarchy and everything's falling apart. They see it as a risk in terms of what the governments do, and I can understand those risks. It's Africa is an area where you don't have one Africa. You have like 50 countries, or how many there are, and everyone is very different. So you have countries which are very stable politically. You have countries where you have a dictatorship, and countries where it's very difficult to do business. Guinea-Bissau is one of them, who had civil wars for quite a while after they went out of the colonization, and they became stable about 10 years ago. You know, they decided that they don't want to fight each other anymore, and they want to have a stable democracy, and they have actually quite well followed this plan. You know, you go into the country and you say, well, you want to do business there, and they actually welcome you very much. You can feel it every way that they want to build something up which lasts for the country. So the politicians really have the goal to bring forward the country instead of filling their own pockets, which might be in other African countries. Of course, you can never guarantee that this is not going to change, but the World Bank believes in it, that they actually give investment guarantees, that if you are under this investment guarantee, you would, and you put, you know, you build something there. Let's say you build an airport and you get investment guarantee from the World Bank, and then you know, you're going to have another war and everything is destroyed. then the World Bank would actually pay you what you have invested, plus all the potential profits you would have had. So that actually goes quite far to guarantee such a thing. And they only do this, of course, if they believe that the country is really going into the right direction.
Okay, okay. Crypto Jedi, no trolling. But Port Blue, we got a nice set of questions here from 3 individuals. Let's start with Port, then we're going to get to Andrew, then Mal, and we're going to go from there. So Port Blue's asking, well, this is actually a nice part of this whole system. You don't want to have to rely on a company or, let's say, government agency with the electricity, with the power for all of this. So Cajutel is going with solar. And how efficient is powering internet hosts through solar? As for now, solar technology is not efficient enough.
Well, that's a good question. The thing is, if you're building a telecommunications network, one of the most important things is reliability. And in every phone central in Europe, you're going to have a lot of infrastructure which is doing nothing else than battery backup systems. And this is just that if you have a power grid failure, that somebody can pick up the phone and make a call to the power company saying, hey, I don't have any power in my house, or you can call the emergency services and so on. But it's very important to be able to make phone calls while the power is down for whatever reason. So if you are building an infrastructure where you have to guarantee 24/7 uptime, then you need battery backup systems. And every cell tower out there has a battery backup system in there. Now, this is an expensive part. Of course, you need batteries and everything, but you have to plan for this properly. So once you have batteries already in your plan, then it doesn't take much more to actually add charging systems to charge the batteries from solar panels. And then if you want to run 24/7 on solar panels, then of course it's the question of dimensioning the solar panels big enough that you generate enough energy to run 24 hours, also if it rains for a week and so on, and to have enough battery capacity to run the tower. Now, there's one big difference. If you talk about efficiency, the efficiency of the system is not that important for us, because if it's only half efficient, you just put twice as much solar panels. This is a one-time cost you put in. The more important thing is you can locally produce your energy, and you don't have to bring it somewhere else. You don't have to sync it to a grid. You're basically producing 48 volts DC power, and you feed the equipment directly off the batteries. And that's something which is done today in, like, if you have relay stations high on a mountain where you don't have an electricity grid, then they do this. So those systems, they exist since a while. They use existing technology. They use solar panels. They use batteries, and they power those systems independently. And it's a big difference to systems where you would put solar panels on the large scales to actually feed the grid. In our case, we're just having an island solution, and that also makes it technology a lot simpler. So the efficiency is not that important, and it's a one-time cost, which we calculated into the cost of the tower. So every tower is going to have his own decentralized systems, and also we don't need that much power per tower. I think we calculated up to 2 kilowatts of power on 24/7 use we should have on every location. And there might be some locations where we need more, but most of them probably need less. So that's the answer to this.
So that was a good answer. I'm reading through the questions. I actually want to, Andrew and Mel, you guys will be put on after this, because this is an interesting question from Mehmed Ahmed. How much have you invested in this project? So for ICO, they usually sponsor, if the YouTubers are honest about that. And yes, this was sponsored. So I did take a payment in Bitcoin and Cajutel tokens. Now, I did want to get a little bit more in Bitcoin so I actually did sell my Bitcoin, put it into fiat currency, paid the bills. I do have a little bit of Cajutel, and I'm sure he was asking how much have you invested with time, money, effort right now, and let's say for this entire project with Cajutel with the company, Andreas?
It's actually difficult to answer because most of the thing is time invested, flying there, getting the license arranged and everything. There's lots of know-how I've put into there because I've built a wireless rural network in Iceland, or I bought one which was outdated and I renewed it. I built the GSM network in Iceland as well. I had a license there in 2007, just before the crash. And so there's lots of pieces of equipment I'm putting into this project, which is already there. So it's difficult to calculate, but it's probably $100,000 or so. And there's going to be more in terms of work, which we were going to put into this.
Right. And see, with any company, if you have never had experience with making a startup and then going into other companies, it is a very difficult thing where you are in charge of yourself, you're in charge of your own hours, and you just have to be fully into it, because if you're not fully into it, it's not going to succeed. And yeah, I can tell that Andreas and his partners have put quite a bit into this. And his partner actually, for some people who are curious about Guinea-Bissau, his partner has been in West Africa for the past 2 decades, and there's a lot of experience on the table with this project. It's definitely sorry. So we had Willie, no, Andrew, and then Mel. Serious question: do they plan to own the land where the tower will stand?
That's a good question. Actually, I have to ask David how this works. We can own the land. The way you usually do this is if the land is owned by the state, you make an agreement with the state that you rent the land and where you build the towers, or you buy it. The land is not very expensive. What we would usually do is, if we go to a village, then we put the towers in a strategic location, and we would actually go to the boss of the village and make an arrangement with him that they take care of the tower so it doesn't get destroyed. So you might have to pay $50 a month or so. You have somebody there to look after it. And if you pay this, nobody's going to touch your tower. That's the thing, because it's you would then dishonor the boss of the village, and that's just the way you have to do the business down there. And I have seen in Senegal, in a neighboring country, in 10 years earlier, I have visited a TV broadcasting company which has built like 21 cities where they have built towers. And they had one tower between Dakar and Thiès, which was on a hill, and they wanted to use this tower to serve both cities. And it didn't work out in the broadcasting thing, but they had a huge tower. It was like 100 meters tall. And they showed me this tower, and there was a guy just living there. And that his job was just to sit there and take care of the tower. And it wasn't even used, But it was better to pay somebody to look after it so the assets don't go away.
All right. You got to protect what's there. Mel, okay, what do you think about this statement? Dictator in Africa could take over the assets, or the government, or some company, or some. So apart from this protection that somebody's actually sitting there, the country decides to take over everything.
This is, of course, always a risk. I mean, it could happen in the US as well. If there's enough political force, it can happen everywhere. But first of all, I don't think this is going to happen in those countries, because they have gone through a lot of development the last 25 years to get away from these kind of things. But there's always a risk. What I have seen happening in other countries, where they had like civil wars, is that you have two parties fighting each other, to the death, but they don't touch the telecom infrastructure. The reason for that is they both need the telecom infrastructure. They need it to communicate with each other. The second thing I have seen is that telecom infrastructure is something where everybody is using and benefiting from. So taking down the telecom infrastructure which works would be the most stupid thing for a government to do, because they would shoot into their own feet. The third thing is, if they would just take it over, then they have to bring the people with the expertise to run it. So because that expertise is not really there, they would ruin the value. So it would be stupid to do it.
It's just not going to make sense logically. There's always risks with any project, but we're addressing those concerns here. One of those interesting questions that keeps popping, well, it's not really a question, it's a comment. I see this popping up both in the live stream and the video. This seems more like a charity. Respect to them, but I don't see how investors will ever see a return from this. And a lot of people are like, that's nice that you're helping out West Africa and bringing them internet. That's cool, but where's the money in this? And well, if you look at the details, there is money. This is, okay, so you're trying to help out the population, but you're also trying to build a business off of this. So Andreas, what's your response to that?
Well, it's very simple. I'm not doing this out of charity reason. Of course, there's some charity side effects, which are nice to have, but I'm building stuff because I like building stuff, and I want to build stuff which actually works long term, but I also want to make stuff which actually is producing money on the long run. I don't want to go into hypes and just throw money at something and hope that I get 12% a month or day in return by ripping up other people. I want to build things which last, and that actually means you have to construct something which is going to be there in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years. And of course, you have to make sure that it's profitable, that it can last that long. And if you look at the business plan, in year 6, we've calculated 6 years. In year 6, we basically have built all the infrastructure we need. So you only need to put a little bit of cost to.
Oh, hold up. I think we did lose the audio. Could you say something?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. It just tuned out for 5 seconds there. So.
Okay. So if you look at the business plan in year 6, we basically have built the main infrastructure with all the towers to serve everybody. And you might only add a few towers to fix a few holes, or to increase capacity, or to repair things which fail. So the operating cost is very low. And so the remaining operating cost is very low, which means you have a high return. In the beginning, it's different because you have to build everything up. So you have a lot of capital expense to build the thing up, but the operating expense is very low, which means in year 6, if we follow the plan, we're going to sit on $150 million in assets, and we have $69 million in EBITDA. And this means we could go and we have $150 million in cash, not in assets. The assets is on top of that. So, which actually means we can pay this $150 million out as dividend if we want to, or we could use it to expand it further if there's potential to expand, and pay less dividend. This is then up to the shareholders to decide. But let's say we just build this network and we just stick to it and don't expand anything, and we just continue. Then this means we would be able to pay $150 million out every year in dividend, because that's the money we're sitting on. So, this is basically then the shareholders' return of investment.
So with the shareholders and with the maintenance and all that, Gallicazoid has commented, read the white paper, people. There are extensive financials there, risk assessments, token benefits, everything. If you have not read through the white papers and the full details, I highly encourage you guys to go through that. And also in my video, I did show a little bit of the financial details. You're able to look through that. David and another person has asked about the management costs, and apart from let's say like the $50 that someone sits by a tower or that something breaks down, these are very low costs. The financials can be looked through the white paper, and there's a difference between maintenance and improving technology. The way I'd say I'd answer this is, with this project, you don't really need the best technology, you just need it to work, because this isn't going for like trying to be the that everybody has amazing internet and high definition, they're able to live stream on YouTube. You do want to improve that, but right now the main thing is they don't have normal internet. They can't watch this live stream right now. It's just impossible. So the main thing is just to get that internet going and to try and expand. And if there's enough funds, it's Guinea-Bissau, but then it also expands to Guinea, where there's a whole new region. But what would you say to that, Andreas? Is there a difference between maintenance and improvements? And what kind of improvements would you see over the next 10, 20, 30 years? And how much would that cost with the solar panels, with internet and all that?
Well, the thing is, what we're doing now is we're doing a big gap. You know, in the European countries, you know, you had copper cables in the ground as a phone central, and then people were coming and improving it to fiber optics between the phone centrals. Then you were improving it to bring internet to the home with ADSL, and then the next technology was VDSL, and now they're bringing the fiber to the home itself. So everything is increasing in small steps. What we are now doing is we are going from zero to the newest technology which is out there. And this is the newest technology, which is reliable, state-of-the-art, which has proven to work. We're not going to go and build a 5G network as an experimental next generation, maybe works network. We're going to use, you know, the modern 4G technology, which is to work. So because we don't want to experiment there, we want to build something which is reliable and is working. Now, because of this, because we're going right to the newest technology, of course, we can just stick with this technology for a longer time. You know, the others, they have 2G networks. They might skip going to 3G and go to 4G at some point in time. Of course, we could then go to 5G networks if there is a demand for it. And that's, of course, something we can think about in 5-6 years, maybe, when we see how the market develops. But at that time, the company will have enough cash to do this or not. And if you look what mobile operators did, they built first generation mobile networks, and then they say they went into the next generation and next generation. And if you build your network good enough in the beginning, then some of those steps can even be just a software upgrade. You know, of course, one of the key things is to have enough capacity running through your main backbone. And because we're building the main backbone from the ground up, of course, we're going to make sure that we have enough capacity on fiber that we can carry all this capacity even for a long time.
And these aren't very big costs, of course, with everything you go through the towers.
Yeah, I give you an example. If you're building a cell tower, I think in our plan we have $130,000 to $150,000 per tower, if I remember correctly. The actual radio infrastructure of this is maybe $20,000. And the reason for that is the biggest cost is actually the civil works, you know, to bring the steel construction there, to build the concrete and everything, because we're building 40-meter high towers, so it's quite a big thing. And to build the power infrastructure. Now, once you have built this and you want to go from 4G to 4.5G, you might have to replace the whole radios. which means you might have to pay another $20,000 to upgrade, and you have to send people there to do it. So your cost is a lot less, and you can profit of everything which is there, because you still have the tower. You don't have to build a new tower.
Right.
And with the fiber, it's the same. You know, if you would build fiber, if you add another fiber into an existing cable, you know, normally cables have like 12, 24 fibers in it. If you buy 48 fiber cables, you don't increase the cost by twice, because the biggest cost is actually to lay the fiber, you know, to cut off the rows, to lay the fiber in and to close again, or to put the pipes in where the fiber is in it. So when you actually run out of fiber capacity, you just blow in another fiber into an empty tube. So the costs are not doubling when you increase capacity. But of course, you have to plan ahead and have an idea of how much capacity you're going to need in the beginning.
Right, right. And I did just want to say, for those who are viewing, just a quick little thing. There is a 30-second delay. Just wanted to remind you guys. So we are trying to get through the questions, but we are trying to pick the best ones here. And if you have not had your question answered, it might take a couple minutes, because we're going through and there's a little bit of lag. And also for monetization, for those at home, I don't want any mid-roll ads, because I do want this to remain flawless experience for you guys. Suhar is asking here. She has two good questions. I'm from Africa and buying the lands is not that difficult. But my question is, how long will the project how long the project is going to run in Worth State? How long? Do you have an exact amount of years right now? What is the long-term plan for this?
Well, we have planned 6 years ahead. What's going to happen after the 6 years has to be seen. I mean, if we are doing our job very well, you know, this can go on forever. I mean, there's no reason why to build an infrastructure and then not continue to run it. And investment of those sizes in telecommunications infrastructure, they run for 40 years in some cases. And if you build a Cellcom tower, you know, it's not going to fall apart in 20 years. It's going to be still there in 20 years. You might have to paint it. You might have to remove rust and, you know, maintain things. And you might pull down some towers and build new ones in some cases. But this is not something which you're just saying, yeah, I'm only going to use it for 5 years. And, you know, in our traditional plan, you know, when we were not thinking about ICOs yet as an investment, when we were like addressing venture capitalist company, we had like an exit strategy. An exit strategy is, no, the venture capital, he wants to come in, puts some millions down, let it run for a couple of years, and then he wants to exit to get his money back, or, you know, to cash out his big profits. So for those kind of investors, our plan was basically to say, okay, in a couple of years down the road, we could go to the stock market doing an IPO. That's how the investors get their money back. Or we just sell it to another company, like you know, companies like Vodafone or O2 or so. They usually go into such countries when they have an established small operator which they can buy up and then, you know, rebrand to their own thing. They don't want to take the risk in the beginning. So that's one scenario. A third scenario is the company would just buy back the shares of that investors, and so on, or just continue and pay dividend continuously. Now, if we're talking about the ICO model of this, then you know, the company could just continue, and the shareholders, they can sell their token anytime they want, because we immediately are like in an IPO where you have a stock market to go. With the ICO, you can immediately trade your token as you want. And it's very easy to trade them. You can trade them on Ether Delta and on other markets, which will pick up the token. So for the investors in this case, it's very easy just to, you know, keep the token, get the dividends, and or just sell it to the next guy who wants to cash out on the dividends. Actually, there was one question in there asking, how we get the dividends, how the shareholders get the dividends. Well, it's very simply, we send the money into the smart contract, and the smart contract pays it out to the token holders. So the token holders only have to call and collect the dividends from the smart contract. So that's very easy then to distribute it to all shareholders, which is another benefit of going ICOs.
Right. And there was one question, well, actually multiple people were addressing this, Suhar, Andrew, and one more person. What kind of experience does the team have with running in Africa? And one of the members, David, right, who I believe not only has been living there for quite a while, but he's also been putting up, was it TV and radio?
Yeah, my experience with Africa is since like 2003, where I got involved in a project of a TV broadcast company who wanted to do voice over IP. They had a license to do internet telephony, more on the international wholesale level. So I helped them to get that off the ground. That was quite early days. They had a lot of regulatory issues then. David was actually working for the same company, a few years earlier or later, I can't remember. And he then went into Bissau and built a TV broadcast station there. So there's on the Bitcoin Talk thread, there's actually a picture of a tower which he has built, where they bring down TV channels from the satellite and rebroadcast it terrestrially, and they actually do pay TV with this as well. So they have some free channels which people can watch for free, and they have some pay TV channels where people actually do a subscription and pay this. And this was very popular service when he did it. So he was like the chief technician and engineer for setting this up, but it was done by an investor. And he then went to Senegal and helped the competitor of the company I was meeting before and do similar things. And he does a lot of broadcast things around the world. So he knows very well how to build towers. He knows how to deal with landowners, how to get the building permissions, who to talk to in the governments, because he has been talking to government people the last 20, 25 years in his jobs already. So that's why he knows very well how to do this, which of course is very valuable in this project, because if you would go as
Oh, hold up. I believe the audio cut out again. Sorry for any technical difficulties, by the way. It's coming from both of us. For example, just from my side, speaking of internet, while moving apartments, I am running on a slower internet connection, which will be upgraded, but it's these small little things, and you got to bear with it. But anyways, this is our first stream together on this channel, or on YouTube in general. So thank you guys for bearing with. And I'm sorry to interrupt there. You were speaking about David.
Yeah, so David has all the experience on how to deal with the government and so on. Now, here's an interesting question from Andrew, who says, I lived in Tanzania. It's a good idea, but securing those towers could be an issue. And that's somewhat true. I'm not sure of how the situation is in Tanzania. In Guinea-Bissau, and in most African countries, you have to make sure that the equipment is secure. So in Europe, you probably put a fence around it and strong concrete. In Africa, you just put a guy there who looks after it, and that's actually our plan. So nobody goes there and steals something. And we actually had one idea, which is not full. If we have energy production there, we actually could put a few outlets there where people can charge their phones. And if people like to charge their phones and they like the services, they may want to make sure nobody's destroying it. That's one way of doing it as well.
And there's also other ways through monetization, which I believe with our last interview through Skype, you mentioned this isn't really planned at the moment, or might have been, but it was kind of on the back burner. Once this is all laid out, there is a possibility of, did you say renting or selling certain parts to the competition, selling to the competition, something about that?
Yeah, let's say we build the whole fiber infrastructure, and we have the big pipes with the big bandwidth. And the competitor, they have also an existing infrastructure, and they want to sell internet to their customers, but their main problem is get access to the bandwidth. So we could also just go and sell them bandwidth. So one possible scenario is also long-term is to say, okay, we skip building the towers and we just sell them bandwidth. Or we just increase the towers and compete heavily with them. I mean, it depends a little bit where the market is going. We have an infrastructure which is a value, and everybody wants to use this infrastructure. And the competitors, they would have to build the same infrastructure. So instead of having them to build it, they could just rent it for us, and we sell them at a price, which of course is very interesting for us, because we then basically have the monopoly. And
Right.
that's something which you not see in many business cases. We have the potentially to become almost a monopoly by building this infrastructure, because nobody has built it before.
You're going into a new region, new area. You're going to be much better than any competition. I remember something from the Bitcoin talk thread. There was some pictures because text wasn't enough. You were going through the pictures, and there was a company that was advertising with low speeds and extremely high rates. And if I remember, it was $89 versus $6 or something like that.
Yeah. Well, this was a picture from what's it called, SpaceNet. That was a provider offering connectivity over satellite, and I think they actually became MTN now. So it's that picture was actually a price list which was hanging at the hotel, which when I was there in 2015, which is a little bit outdated, but it shows what's the infrastructure there. So they were actually selling you a ridiculously high price at the low bandwidth. I think the highest they had was 256 kilobits in terms of speed, and then they give you 5 gigabytes of data, and they charge like $400 or so in the highest class.
Right. Yeah.
And if you compare this to the prices we do, we are like 55 times more, speed for the dollar. On top of that, we also have no gigabyte limits, because you can just, it's a flat offer. So if you would put that into consideration, we probably would be 1,000 times faster and cheaper in terms of performance, because you can transport a lot more of gigabytes on a 2 or 4 meg link over 24 hours times 30 days. So this is just to illustrate, the big differences we have, and situation is slightly better with the mobile operators than what's on this picture, but still we're talking like price performance ratio of like 20 times more. And that's a big differentiator. And we still have room to go faster, because if you have a fiber in the ground, you can go 1,000 times faster if you have to. It's not that difficult to do.
Right. And CryptoJet, I just wanted to address really quick. For any semi-related, non-related questions or about payouts, I can address those in a further live stream, which we might do another live stream later on this channel. So with this, I see that there's quite a bit of questions here. Let's try and pick. I kind of like this question. I know it's not super important, but I'm just curious about this, Andreas. Halvard has asked, how do you find the experience of answering questions from crypto investors on a live stream versus meeting with the venture capitalists? How was that like, the experience with the VCs?
I think it's pretty similar. I mean, I don't have a problem to answer questions on the project because I strongly believe in the project. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it. So, you know, there's always arguments coming along, and you have to deal with them. And that's part of my daily life, just to think of things you haven't thought through before, and then come up with solutions. And we have put a lot of work in this project to find the right things to do. And there's still a lot of work out there. For example, we have not decided on any type of equipment we are going to use, because the type of equipment we were planning originally was like 2 years ago. And there's newer vendors out there who do newer things. So we're going to decide this at the time we actually need the thing. But we know what the price tags of those equipments are. So once we get into this, we get the funds in, you know, if everything goes well, this is like in two months from now, then we're going to decide on which equipment we're finally going to use, which vendor, and so on. And then we're going to get and use the best thing which is out there. And my biggest problem with the venture capitalist was not to explain them the business case or, you know, face them in meetings and so on. My biggest problem was actually to get into the door. So they actually read the business plan and invite me to come.
Right. Due to the time and just the fact that they had so many investors. And was this the first time so how did the idea come about with an ICO? Because it's a valid option for any company now.
Yeah.
Awesome. You're able to go through the internet and get funds from Australia, from New Zealand, from somebody who's not interested in cryptocurrencies, or West Africa, just because they believe in the project, or there's so many different reasons why one person might invest $9 as was the lowest investor, or another person might decide, oh, here's $50,000 because I really strongly believe in it. Or really quick thing before Andreas answers, Adnan, how can one know in which coin he or she should invest in for short term or for long term? I might add in, the way you invest in ICOs is that there's nothing guaranteed, but there's nothing guaranteed in the investment world. Any guarantees are, well, schemes. And with this, with any ICO, you shouldn't invest money that you can't afford to lose. You should diversify. You should do your research behind projects. The projects that are hiding details that don't go fully into, you have to read the white papers. There's, you know, if you get any red flags, then before you fully get away from it, if there's other good people who are talking about it, you might want to contact the people behind it. And in this case, if there's any questions, by the way, when we wrap up the live stream, if there's still any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. Andreas was actually responding to some from the previous videos. So you're also able to go to Bitcoin Talk and Telegram and email Andreas and the team. So if there's any questions with that. But back to what I was talking about, how did you come up with the fact that, oh, you know, the ICO, apart from it's going to be a little bit better than with VCs, what was the exact moment that like just switched it?
First of all, I have experience with Bitcoin miners because I have a data center in Iceland where I had customers who do Bitcoin mining. I actually built the whole data center just for one company, like a 3 megawatt facility and so on. So this got me into the crypto coin world, but I wasn't really mining myself, but I followed what happened. And I then started to read about ICOs, which was kind of new to me. And I then realized, well, an ICO is nothing else than an IPO. The only thing which changes is instead of using shares, you use tokens. Instead of using a bank which goes into, brings you to the stock exchange, you need other people who promote you. Instead of having what they call a prospectus, you need to have something which is called a white paper. And instead of having a stock market exchange, you just have the cryptocurrency exchanges. So at the end of the day, it's the same market mechanisms, except that things go a lot faster. There's also a lot less regulations currently, and I think this is going to change over the years with all those scams out there. You know, the regulations will come in and make sure that people don't get scammed. But it's the same market mechanism. However, going the IPO way with the startup is very, very, very difficult. It's going to cost you millions. Usually, companies go IPO when they have a proven business case, which means they're already profitable and they need more money to expand or so. Or VCs has put a lot of money in and they want to go out. So for an IPO, it's too early. So, but the market mechanics is still the same. Now with an ICO, you actually can do an instant IPO if you want. Which was very appealing to me because I started to understand, well, this is a way to raise money from the crowd, from people who want to invest into, who want to invest smaller amounts, and might give us the possibility to start while we spent years of finding VCs and other traditional investors, because it's very difficult to find them. And by going on an ICO, it's much easier to address just the general public, and whoever likes this project can invest. And the guys who says, well, Africa is a scam altogether, then they don't invest. There are some people out there who believe this. And it's like a democratization of the financial market. And once I understood what's happening in the ICO world, it immediately clicked and said, well, this is the way to go. The old way has proven to be so slow, so expensive to raise money that an ICO path is much easier to go. And the market mechanics are the same, but it's an easier way, and then also a more direct way. In a way, I kind of like this way that you're able to communicate with investors directly, and they can raise questions, they can bring in additional points of view, things to think about, or new market angles. And actually, while in this process in the last few weeks, we found a lot of people who invested small amounts or even didn't invest at all because they didn't have the money to do, but gave us a lot of very important feedback. And I think this is the way to go into the future.
Right. And to address a simple question, you guys are able to go to Etherscan, or there's other websites that are able to check out the exact amount of tokens for any ICO. With this, there's, I believe, 1.78 million, correct? Or how many exact tokens are there?
Yeah, there's 1.78 million tokens in total, out of which 720,000 are in this ICO, 60,000 are for marketing purposes reserved, and 1 million is the existing shareholders.
Okay, gotcha.
And there's...
Oops, sorry, it cut out there. And there's...
Right now, there's 97 shareholders.
Okay. And with this, gosh, I lost it. Galcazoid. Will you extend your ICO timeline in order to hit more of your funding targets? I'd rather this project move forward with sufficient funding, even if it means extending the ICO. I think Andreas has answered this a little bit earlier, slightly, that there would be a shareholders meeting to just figure out, hey, what's the best strategy to go about this here. But do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, if we're not hitting the target, then, but we're getting close to it, we'll probably extend it a little bit to be able to reach the target. I mean, we have made an offering, and that's in the white paper. Like if you do an IPO, you say you make a public offering, which means these are the rules where you're selling shares under those conditions in this time frame. And if we don't sell all the shares, we can still come back and say we do a second IPO for the second ICO for the remaining shares at whatever conditions we decide then, Or we could just say, well, we just continue with the existing conditions and change the time frame. But that's a possible option.
So Jack's going here, and he's wondering about the equipment. So you did say a little bit earlier you're not exactly sure because the equipment needed to get updated. How do you know, if you don't know exactly what equipment now, how do you know how much money it will be needed per tower and for the equipment?
Well, first of all, the biggest cost is not the equipment. The biggest cost is the civil works infrastructure. We know what a 2G network costed. We know what the 3G network costed. We know what current 4G network vendors are charging for their equipment. And we have a pretty good idea what vendors will charge us for 4.5G equipment coming up the line. The newer it is, the more the vendors are asking for. But at the other side of it, you might need less equipment. For example, a 2G network was much more expensive than the 3G network because you had the base station, then you had the base station controller, then you had the mobile switch. And in the 3G network, you have the 3G base station, and then you didn't have the base station controller anymore because you connected it right to the RNC. So technology evolves and make the world become simpler, and you actually save money down the road, because the mobile operators out there who have millions of towers, they don't want to go from 3G to 4G and spend millions of dollars. So they're very careful also selecting. So there's a big price competition between the vendors. And of course, vendors who have a newer feature who can deliver twice the bandwidth on the same spectrum, they want to get that paid. But this additional price tag is not that making that big difference on the overall price of the project, because laying the fiber, building the towers, putting the power infrastructure up, putting up the antennas and all this is a big part of the cost, and the equipment is a relatively small cost.
And Willie, is it easy to buy a share, or do I need America? Oh, sorry, that was way earlier. That was a different comment. But with buying these shares, with actually investing into this, so do your research before how to send from an Ethereum wallet. You don't want to send from an online Ethereum wallet, because if you do, you won't be able to receive the tokens. It's gonna be a little bit of a mess up there, which sometimes that happens. So you want to make sure that you have the private keys. Now, okay, I backtrack a little bit with certain online wallets, For example, myetherwallet.com, I believe it was, or .org, that works. You don't want to do it, or from Bitrex or Poloniex. And this is an ICO, so it's like you need Ethereum in order to switch for. You can't pay with cards, but that's for any ICO. There's certain ICOs that accept both Ethereum and Bitcoin, but that's just how this is. And so with this, how about let's do a couple more questions, and for anything that doesn't get answered, you guys will still be able to rewatch the whole video, and you will be able to go back to old videos. And again, just send anything you have onto the emails and Bitcoin Talk and the comments, and we'll try and get through as many as possible here. So let's see, what is one of the biggest obstacles right now, in your opinion, Andreas?
My biggest obstacle is to get the cash in to actually build it fast enough. That's the key thing. I know how the technology works. I know how to deal with the country. I know how to get the permission. Basically, we have everything planned, except we need the cash to actually execute the plan. So besides that, as an obstacle, well, there's nothing I could just pinpoint to right now where I can say, well, this is the biggest obstacle,
Right. There's many things that are under concern, and a lot of those are listed in the white papers. So a lot of people are thinking whether this is a short-term or long-term project. This is more of a long-term project. There's no guarantees, but this is with any ICO. This is with cryptocurrencies, is very volatile. However, with this, unlike other ICOs, you do have actual assets. Some are fully virtual, and with that, it's a little bit harder to control. But with this, you get a little bit more security. And in response to Al Rowe here, IPOs and ICOs, they're similar, but they're also very different from one another. However, I understand we understand that with IPOs, you do have a lot more security. However, you still have companies that are able to get away with fraud, and of course, then it's illegal and criminal. But just because something's an IPO and it's not cryptocurrency based, even though cryptos are still coming out and it's new and there's not enough regulation of it, just because there's regulation doesn't mean that there's fraud going on. And there's plenty of examples like that where, you know, after 2008, so many companies fell, so many management teams, so many hedge funds, and people were surprised with that. So that's why you always have to do your research no matter what you're going into. Is there any chance to open the project in another country in the future? For example, like Chad?
Well, this is something I can't really answer. I don't know the situation in Chad, but if the situation is similar, then of course you can do the same thing in another country. We have looked at Guinea-Bissau. We look at Guinea as an extension. We can also imagine adding maybe Gambia as a possible country. We might look at Mali. We might look at Sierra Leone. Of course, those are countries which are nearby where you can profit of the infrastructure of the neighboring country. In terms of Chad, I don't know the situation there politically and another thing, but from a technology point of view, you can do this in any country. I mean, I've built networks in Iceland. I have planned networks in Mongolia. I have planned networks in Antarctica. And the situation is always the same. If there's a market demand for it, if there's the political environment where you can build this, you can build this anywhere. You might have different challenges in different countries. For example, in Guinea-Bissau, it's mostly flat, so it's very easy to build. You build towers 40 meters high, and then you can draw a circle on the map, and you have your more or less the coverage area. If you do the same thing in Switzerland, you have plenty of mountains which get into the way, so you have to do totally different radio planning, which of course we will also do with corresponding radio planning tools. And yeah, so it's possible to do it in any country, but you want to do it step by step. You cannot do everything at the same time. But if there's enough market demand, you know, you can do it anywhere.
Right, right. And they do have a plan for the next 6 years. Right now it's Guinea-Bissau. If that works out, fantastic. Guinea moving out. And Andrew's got a good question here. Mike, please ask what exchange the token will be traded on and what your plan is with future exchanges. How are you going to go about that?
Well, currently you can trade it on Ether Delta, which is like a decentralized exchange. We were talking to some exchanges to pick it up, but I think this is only going to be coming live when it's you know, when the ICO has been completed and so on. The thing is really, the exchanges, they don't want to list tokens which nobody buys or sells, and so there has to be a certain momentum that they start listing it. But of course, it's in our interest that it's listed everywhere and you can trade it, and we're trying to get it listed everywhere. But as this is a long-term project, it might not be a short-term goal to get it immediately listed. But once the IPO is over, we'll talk to all those exchanges again that they can actually list it. Because if you go to them and say, I have a new token, it has never been traded, please list it, you know, they're going to laugh at you. But if you have 1 million shareholders and a few millions in market capitalization, it's going to be different. Right,
right. And with any project, you need momentum. That's why Cajutel is here. That's why they're advertising. That's why they're marketing, because you know, it's important. And I know this was way up there. I don't know if you see this, Andreas, but someone was asking about the marketing once the ICO is finished. Let's say the capital is all there. I remember you mentioned to me that in Africa, it works a little bit differently, where sure, traditional advertising will work nicely, but like by traditional, see, I'm getting it confused. I'm looking like inbound, outbound marketing with online advertising and all this. This is nice for the ICO when we're talking about cryptocurrencies, but over there, it's more like word of mouth. That works fantastic because if you have one happy customer, he or she's gonna tell their family, their friends, and this isn't their main goal isn't monopoly. But with this, it's they're going to get if they're the only ones in the area. Sure, there might be some competition, but they have higher prices or just the infrastructure is not there. If they have happy customers, then those customers will have no reason to go to anybody else if the competition does come, because that's how it is. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, of course, the marketing works differently than in Europe. For example, if you would use Google AdWords to try to sell your internet access, you would lose 100% because the people are not able to see your ad because they don't have internet yet. So you cannot sell them something over the internet if they don't have internet. Then if you want to go other ways, like you could do advertisement on TV, but a lot of people don't have TVs, and there's like one TV channel in the country. And the rest might be over satellite if somebody has the satellite receivers. So you have to deal with the ways the country works, and the word of mouth is actually the best advertisement you can get. And what we have planned is actually to build teams of people who run around who actually install for us. Because if we get the customers, they have to put a small antenna onto their roof, which points to our cell tower, to then have like Wi-Fi in their home, so they can access the internet from all their laptops, phones, and whatever. That's like the fixed internet access way, the fixed wireless internet access. And those people who go out there, those are kind of mini technicians who know how to configure the equipment and put it up. And we have a setup fee when somebody signs up, and that setup fee is basically paying this engineer who puts it up. Now, if you're getting people out there and say, well, we have this new product and you can go and install it, they're going to go and find you customers, so they get paid to install it. So it's in their interest to tell everybody that there is this new service, and when the people sign up, they earn money themselves. So you have like immediately your sales force right there.
Right.
And then of course you have you could put it into newspapers, but I haven't seen any newspaper there yet. So it's like what I have experienced in that part of Africa is that if you provide them with a good service, with a good product, and you're not ripping them off, they are going to buy from you forever. If you are selling them a good product overpriced, they're going to buy from you until they figure out that you're ripping them off, and then you're gone forever. So the best strategy is actually to go there and say, okay, we're building a good project. You make sure that it's the best quality you can deliver, and that's where you actually can make a lot of points compared to competitors, by having a service which always works, which, if the power goes out and your laptop still has battery, you still have internet access. If you are able to provide this kind of service, then people are going to stick with you. And if you have a fair price for it, then that's the best advertisement you can get. I mean, I've seen this in Switzerland when I started this ISP in the early days. We were once listed as the fastest internet provider in some test. And, this is like the best advertisement ever. It wasn't done by us. It was by some other companies who were testing all the internet providers. But for us, it was like, of course, we want to have a good quality in terms of speed, and not too much overbooking. And that's why we actually topped this list. And that's the best advertisement you can have.
Of course. I mean, it's all about building relationships long-term. If one person's happy, they share it to everybody, and there's no reason to go to the competition. So this is kind of, I don't know. Let's go through it. Quick question. Siri, if I go in for a certain amount, can I have a tower named after me?
Yeah, we can name it after 0x114981005D and so on, which is the token address, because that's the only thing we need. We know about our investors.
There we go.
Yeah, they are anonymous.
Towers can be named. So, Andrew, Diana, or Ramahadran, if you want something like that, just go through email. Let's see. Let's pick Halvard. Let's pick three more questions. And then for any other questions, just again, you will have for new viewers, this is getting to 2 hours, so it's nice. You have a lot of details you're able to go through. Now, since this is a live stream, the quality will go down a little bit when you're actually viewing the video, but that's just how it is through Google Hangouts. For this, I actually adjusted it. Usually it's low latency. I adjusted it to normal latency, so it's a little bit better. Anyways, so with the token exchanges, so there's a lot of experience with the actual internet and through the companies when you look at the past 2 decades for you and David. But with this new sphere over here, have you, let's see, what's one of the biggest challenges with cryptocurrencies that you see for exchanges, for the blockchain, for the current token that you might have?
Well, the interesting thing is really that the ERC20 token system is very easy to use. And we hired some expert to write us the smart contract. And we're not doing anything fancy with it. We're just using the token like you use it as a share certificate. So we don't see a lot of difficulties in that area. And there's companies out there like Aragon One, which makes the administration of it even easier. And I think that's one of the reasons why I actually like doing everything on the blockchain. You can verify everything, and there's no hidden documents pulled out of a drawer out of a sudden, and you can verify that the amount of tokens are out there are exact. You can verify everything, and it's very democratic way to treat your shareholders. And yeah, I mean, this is the thing I see with having a token. And of course, we might have to swap the token at some times if we have a new smart contract to update with new rules or regulations. And but the token system makes it very easy for everybody to follow this.
Right. And with the tokens themselves, why are they so expensive compared to other ICOs?
There was a simple reason. We had 1 million shares. We wanted to raise 720,000 additional shares. So we just said, well, 1 token is 1 share. We could have said, 1 token is 1/10 of a share, then we would have 1/10 of the price. But it's just the numbers we're doing this way. And at the end of the day, what really matters to you is how much money you put in and how much stake do you have out of this deal. 80,000 of the company. And in other cases, you buy a token at $1 instead of $15 or whatever it costs now. And you get 1/1000th of nothing, So you have to put the value of the token in relation to what you're actually getting it. And so if you look at the IPO market, in the stock market, companies often do stock splits because they want to have the price of a share, below $100. And the reason for that is they want small investors to be able to buy 1 share. And the reason is, if you have a share being valued at $100 and you have an investor who wants to invest $50, he cannot buy half a share. In the cryptocurrency, you can buy a half a share. You can buy a millionth of a share.
Right.
There's no technical. It's just moving the digits correctly. So you're not going to see any stock splits in the ICO market. But of course, there's lots of tokens out there where they say, you know, you can buy one token for $0.01, hoping then it's going to go to $1,000 one time. Now, if you would put this into our perspective, then you would buy a share for maybe for $15, and you hope to go it to be worth $15,000 at some time, or 105 million. But you know, you have to be realistic. Either you're going gambling and you say, well, there's this very, very small chance that a penny stock becomes really big, or you go into a project where you say, well, I'm spending $1,000 here in investment into a company, and this $1,000 maybe becomes $5,000 in a few years down the road, or $10,000, but it might take 5 years. And but the risk is also smaller, because the risk is also in relation of the gain. You know, the bigger the gain, the higher the risk. That's a rule of thumb in investment.
Right,
you know?
Right. And I know I said 3 questions, but there's so many that, you know what, I'm going to do one more from my side, and then you're able to pick some, Andreas. Mm-hmm. Diana's wondering about the price, maybe not of the token itself, but the price of the actual internet. She's saying, please explain why the cost is so expensive for the user. I only pay £35 here in the UK.
The reason is because the existing providers are just charging them so much. You know, the thing is, if you would have asked for this kind of quality of internet 10 years ago in the UK, you would have probably paid a lot more. I remember when I started as an internet provider, you could get a 64 kilobit internet connection, and you paid like $10,000 a month for 64 kilobit. That's what people were paying, you know, companies were paying for a permanent internet connection in 1994 in Switzerland. And this has changed since then. Of course, in Africa, our plan is to start with something like $45 a month while we're building up the internet, but it actually goes down to like $9 a month. And we are able to sustain this value and still make profit. The reason why it's more expensive in the beginning is because we have to put a lot of infrastructure there, which is not there. And in the UK, we have the infrastructure already there. You know, if they want to upgrade to newer technology, they have to swap a few things, but they still use the same fibers, which are there since 20 years. They use the same copper wires. They use the same radio towers, which are there. So you are picking back on a lot of existing infrastructure, which allows you to be very low in price. And in Africa, we're just building this whole thing. So which means we have a high capacity, cost. And, you know, the more capital we would have, and the longer we do the return of investment, the lower the price we can put, of course, in the entry level. But we're not doing this for free. You know, we want to earn money. We want to earn enough money to actually build the next towers, and then the next towers and the next towers. So we start with a price which is reasonable to the market, and then we lower the price when we have to, or when we feel that it would bring us more customers. So it's an optimization also on the return of investment.
Perfect. So, Andreas, do you see any really good questions here?
Yeah, there's an interesting comment from Andrew who says, like, in Tanzania, our internet was $250 per month. Well, that doesn't surprise me, you know, because it was probably one of the 10 in the town who needed to have internet for business and others didn't.
And let's see. Is there any that we missed? That, sorry if we missed any, guys. We were going through quite a bit. I'm scrolling through. I missed out on phase 1 discount. Let's see. So is it currently in phase 2, or is it? I see it's super close to phase 2. I can't tell whether it just.
Yeah, that's actually a good question. I actually don't know if we are still in phase 1 or if we are in phase 2. I've changed the web page to show phase 2 because it's just like on the line, which means if you buy now, you might still get a few tokens in phase 1 and a few in phase 2.
So what's the difference? Like, where can we find out exactly how many is needed to go into phase 2?
Well, the smart contract does it automatically. It will, if it's at the board, if you would buy 1 million token, no, you can't. But if you buy 100,000 tokens, then you would probably get a few out of phase 1, a few out of phase 2, and a few out of phase 3, and so on. So it just calculates how many tokens you're getting.
Okay, gotcha. And let's see, with the for the guys who are actually investors, what is the best way to stay in touch and make sure that if there's any updates, to be updated with everything?
Okay, that's a good question. What we do is we are having a Slack, how you call the Slack chat room, where we write updates. There's not much happening there right now. Telegram is probably the better way to do it. So join our Telegram group, which is t.me/Cajutel. And it's also linked on the webpage. We post small updates on Twitter, and we might set up a mailing list for investors later on as well. Okay. But I think the Telegram group is probably the easiest one.
Okay, gotcha. So again, Telegram and Slack, those are mobile apps that you can download, super easy. And this goes for not just this ICO, but a lot are using it. It's just coming out. I remember when I used to do IRC chats, but you had to log in. Pretty nice. And there will be email lists. So for this project, if you are interested, the links are down in the description below. And you're able to check out previous videos as well. If you have any questions, leave comments down in this section below. One thing that I wanted to point out, I probably should have done it earlier. For the people watching this at home, you won't be able to see, so here's the live stream itself, and here's the live stream questions. These won't be available once it's on video. So for anybody kind of wondering where we're pulling these questions from, but for anybody who still has something, just write it down as a comment. It's going to play like a normal video, and it will be up after this is finished. It's just going to have to process through it, but as soon as it's processed, it should be up within the next 30 minutes. It is a little bit longer, so it might take a little bit to process. Yeah, that should be it. If you guys are interested, definitely check out all the white papers, the website details. They're linked down. Let's see. Do you think we could answer? Let's do. Andreas, do you have any last words here?
I think Andreas wants to go for a cigarette break. No, I don't smoke.
There you go. There you go. No, it's actually difficult to do live streams for longer periods of time, and especially if you're not used to it. Even for me, since I compare myself sometimes to the people who live stream every single day for 3 hours. The longest live stream I've ever done was 8 hours, and it actually kind of mentally just tires you out. You're looking at the screen and you're like, oh my goodness, it all starts blending together. It's kind of an interesting process. All right, I think that was good. There was a lot of good information in there, and if you guys are interested, definitely check out. We will keep updating on this project. I'm invested into this project. I'm confident about this. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this on this channel. I want to be posting videos. I want to be doing the live stream. This was our first one, and I want to thank Andreas for his time here. I want to thank you guys as well for coming in here. This was awesome. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. It was a nice pleasure to be on this channel. It's the first time I was on YouTube ever, and I enjoyed it very much, and I hope to stay in touch with all of you.
Perfect. All right, guys, we shall see you tomorrow, and this will process. So thank you, Andreas. Thank you, guys, and have a wonderful rest of your night. Bye.